He said compliance was dead weight, that my caution made clients nervous. In one meeting, he stripped my project, my credibility, and finally my job, all in the name of efficiency. But what Daniel Rhodes didn't realize was that I'd built the very system he was breaking, and that system remembers everything. Every signature, every falsified approval, every shortcut he called smart business. He fired me for slowing him down. He never guessed I'd already coded the clause that would stop him cold. Before I continue, tell me, have you ever been blamed for doing your job too well? Drop your city in the comments. Daniel's voice cut through the conference room like a blade. If you can't adapt, Natalie, maybe compliance isn't your place anymore. The room went silent, the kind of silence that hums. 9 people in glass reflections, none daring to meet my eyes. The quarterly audit review still glowed on the screen behind him. Red flags my system had caught. Red flags he'd dismissed as technical noise. He wanted them buried before the client presentation. I'd refused. That was my crime. Daniel leaned back, smirking. We need forward thinkers here, not hall monitors. Laughter rippled from 2 directors desperate to stay on his good side. My throat tightened, but I kept my hands folded, nails pressing half-moons into my palms. I'd built the compliance engine that protected this firm from federal violation, the one Daniel now wanted to silence, because it slowed his bonus cycle. He was dressed sharp, confident, every inch the kind of man who mistook control for competence. So, he said lightly, we can discuss a transition plan or you can make this simple and resign. HR nodded like a metronome, eyes on the floor. I felt the humiliation pulse in my chest, the mix of disbelief and clarity that comes when someone burns the bridge you built beneath their feet. I gathered my notes, stood, and forced my voice steady. I'll make it simple. His smirk deepened, thinking he'd won. But the system he'd just mocked was still live, still logging, still watching. I didn't start out trying to build power. I built precision. When I joined Stratus 12 years ago, compliance was a corner desk no one visited unless something was on fire. I turned it into a system that could see through walls. The Sentinel framework wasn't just software. It was discipline in code. It learned patterns, cross-referenced reports, and caught what people tried to bury. I'd written most of it in silence, long nights, 2 monitors glowing against half-empty coffee cups. I liked order, accuracy, the relief of things adding up, but in this company, precision was political. Every time Sentinel flagged a discrepancy, Daniel called it delay. He didn't understand that the red flags weren't bugs. They were confessions. I'd learned early to speak in documentation, not confrontation. Every recommendation I made had a trail, timestamps, source references, internal memos. My colleagues in data analysis trusted me. They'd seen the framework save accounts from audit penalties more times than anyone could count. But the higher I climbed, the quieter the respect became. Leaders wanted clean numbers, not clean truth. Daniel's type thrived on urgency. He could turn negligence into efficiency with a sentence. I was the opposite, deliberate, methodical, and infuriating to those who thrived on shortcuts. The week before that meeting, I'd caught an irregular pattern in a major client report, $1 million misclassification. I'd brought it to Daniel, expecting we'd fix it before certification. Instead, he'd stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. Natalie, you're paid to prevent issues, not create them, he'd said, smiling as if he were teaching me something. I walked out of his office then, a little colder, a little more aware of the thin ice under my feet. The younger analysts whispered warnings. Daniel didn't like dissent, and anyone who challenged his streamlining disappeared into reorganizations. I stayed careful, invisible. My work spoke quietly, but it kept the firm clean. until Daniel decided that clean was slowing him down. The irony was almost mathematical. The more he stripped control from compliance, the more valuable my framework became. Because it wasn't just an audit tool, it was proof. It stored everything, immutable, traceable, impossible to delete without authorization. I hadn't meant for it to be a weapon, but when you design systems that preserve truth, they don't forget who tried to erase it. I didn't know it then, but every line of code was already testifying on my behalf. Daniel's campaign for efficiency began the Monday after my exit interview. Overnight, compliance reports went from detailed analyses to one-page summaries with cheerful green check marks. He announced it as a strategic simplification to improve client satisfaction. It looked good on dashboards, but inside, we all knew it meant silence. By the end of that quarter, the Sentinel alerts I used to oversee had been rerouted to a shared inbox no one monitored. The audit trail grew blind spots, subtle gaps disguised as speed. I watched from the sidelines for weeks as colleagues messaged me quietly. New directives bypassing validations, executives signing certifications in half the usual time. Daniel's name appeared on every memo, every approval. He'd turned compliance into theater, and the board applauded the show. But theater doesn't hide numbers. I noticed inconsistencies in the financial summaries Stratus released to investors. Earnings inflated just enough to please shareholders, but too perfect to be real. It was the kind of manipulation you only notice if you've memorized the rhythm of authentic data, and I had. The company was sprinting toward a cliff, smiling for the cameras, when Daniel hosted his Vision for Growth town hall. I sat in the back, invisible among junior analysts. He strutted through slides, showing exponential revenue projections, talking about agility and confidence, words that meant nothing but sold everything. "We're finally free from red tape," he said, and the room erupted in applause. I looked around at faces half-lit by the screen, people clapping because not clapping meant suspicion. That was how control worked. Manufactured optimism over quiet terror. I left before it ended. Outside the glass doors, the city hummed, traffic lights blinking in orderly patterns that felt more honest than anything happening inside. That night, I reopened my personal archive, scrolling through old Sentinel logs still connected to my private developer account. They were still receiving mirrored backups from Stratus servers, a feature I'd implemented years ago to test remote redundancy. I'd forgotten to disable it. Or maybe I hadn't. There they were. Full audit trails, unedited, time-stamped, every falsified signature Daniel had approved. I realized then that his arrogance wasn't just moral failure, it was structural. He'd removed oversight assuming no one would ever question him. That assumption was about to cost him everything. Over the next few days, rumors started leaking through private channels. A major client requested an independent review after discrepancies surfaced in their quarterly report. Daniel blamed a data formatting error, but the panic in the internal emails told another story. Someone from the client's legal team asked for Sentinel's original validation files, unaware they were still tied to my credentials. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The system would answer for me. Inside Stratus, Daniel doubled down. He ordered IT to override remaining Sentinel functions and replace them with a lighter proprietary system named Horizon. It looked identical, same dashboards, same metrics, but no memory. It was designed to forget, but Sentinel didn't forget. It had replicated every modification Daniel made, every deleted flag, every altered record. The code recognized its own corruption and stored each instance in a secured vault labeled administrative actions. A safeguard I'd written after an early boss once tried to wipe evidence during a failed audit. Now it was happening again, almost identically. Except this time, I was no longer inside. Watching it unravel from the outside was strange, part grief, part grim satisfaction. They thought they'd erased me. But the ghost in their system still carried my initials in its architecture, waiting quietly for the day it would speak louder than I ever could. The night after I resigned, I couldn't sleep. My brain kept replaying Daniel's smirk, that lazy confidence of a man who believed he'd erased me. Around midnight, I turned on my laptop, more out of restlessness than intent. But when I opened my private workspace, the familiar interface of Sentinel greeted me, still active, still syncing. A small line of text blinked at the corner. License authentication. Pending. It hit me like an electric pulse. During last year's infrastructure migration, Stratus's IT department had postponed signing the intellectual property reassignment forms that would have officially transferred Sentinel's ownership to the company. I'd signed my section of the paperwork, but theirs had been delayed pending executive review. That delay was still open. The entire system, every client portal, every verification engine, was operating under my personal developer license. My name wasn't just on the code, it was inside it. I'd built Sentinel with a structure that validated ownership through the original author's key. Without my active approval, the framework functioned on borrowed time. When I left, that timer began to count down. I scrolled through the legal folder on my desktop until I found the contract copy Renee had reviewed years ago when I'd updated my employment terms. Section 9.4. Ownership of unassigned proprietary code remains with the original author until formal transfer execution. I had insisted on that clause after watching another engineer lose his design to a corporate acquisition. Now, that tiny paragraph was my entire shield. I emailed Renee at 2:47 a.m. Found something. Might be significant. Call when you can. She responded 5 minutes later. If it's what I think it is, document everything. By morning, we were on a video call. Renee's calm professionalism grounded the adrenaline buzzing under my skin. Natalie, do you have proof of authorship? She asked. I opened the repository logs. 12 years of commits, timestamps, and code signatures, all mine. The ownership trail was airtight. Renee smiled faintly. Then technically, Sentinel isn't theirs. You can file a retention claim. I hesitated. That would cripple their systems. You didn't design them to be dishonest, she said. You designed them to be accurate. Let accuracy do its work. I spent the rest of the day building a secure archive of every deployment file, audit trail, and communication, showing Stratus's failure to execute the transfer. No embellishment. Just evidence. That evening, Renee filed the claim with the Federal IP Office. The timestamp read 6:12 p.m., the exact moment Sentinel's last update synced to my account. The symmetry was poetic. Within hours, my inbox started pinging with system alerts. Unauthorized modification attempt detected. Encryption bypass logged. Someone inside Stratus was trying to rewrite Sentinel's kernel to remove the authentication dependency, but Sentinel wasn't just software. It was architecture built to preserve integrity. Every alteration attempt automatically generated a mirrored record on my backup server labeled tamper-proof. Watching those notifications pile up felt surreal, like witnessing justice assemble itself in real time. I didn't hack or manipulate anything. I simply allowed the structure I'd built to function as intended. By the next morning, the system was quietly compiling every unauthorized edit into a single report stored under my account. I realized then that revenge wasn't something you orchestrated. It was something you enabled by refusing to compromise your design. Daniel thought he'd fired an employee. In truth, he'd dismissed the only person who could keep his house of cards from collapsing. I leaned back, watching the sunrise creep through the blinds. and whispered to the empty room, "You really should have read the fine print." It started with an error message no one could explain. Overnight, every Stratus client portal showed the same alert. Verification key invalid, data certification suspended. Within hours, the helplines flooded. Account managers scrambled, IT teams pulled all-nighters, executives barked orders no one could follow. By dawn, the firm's crown jewel, its spotless audit reputation, had fractured in full view of its largest investors. I didn't need to read the headlines. I could hear the panic humming through the city. The system Daniel had silenced was speaking again, and this time, it spoke in every client dashboard. Stratus's compliance network had entered automatic lockdown when Sentinel's authentication token expired, precisely as designed. I hadn't written it as revenge. It was simply what truth does when mishandled. It shuts down everything until order returns. My phone vibrated with messages from unknown numbers, then one from Renee. "They've realized it's your code. Be ready." By mid-morning, screenshots of the system failure circulated across LinkedIn and internal forums. The narrative shifted fast, from minor glitch to catastrophic oversight. Every report Daniel had fast-tracked now sat frozen behind locked access. A simple reauthorization could fix it, but only I held that key. Stratus's legal counsel sent a request for urgent cooperation. I didn't reply. There was nothing to discuss until they acknowledged ownership. Around noon, Daniel called from his personal phone. His voice, usually smooth and smug, cracked under the weight of panic. "Natalie, we need to talk. There's confusion around licensing. I know you didn't intend this to escalate." I listened in silence, then ended the call. He wanted me to fix the fallout from his shortcuts without admitting the cause. That's how people like him survived. They outsourced accountability. Not this time. I forwarded his voicemail to Renee. Within an hour, she filed an official claim of proprietary control over Sentinel, supported by timestamps, signed contracts, and deployment records showing the unexecuted transfer clause. The same oversight Daniel had dismissed as admin clutter was now worth more than the firm's entire compliance department. The board convened an emergency session that afternoon. An analyst leaked portions of the transcript later, Daniel insisting Sentinel was developed collectively, the general counsel whispering that all recorded code commits carried my credentials, not his. The realization hit them like impact shock. They had built their empire on a product they didn't own. I imagined Daniel's expression when they told him. A mixture of disbelief and dawning horror, the same look he'd given me when I'd walked out of that conference room. Except now, he was the one being dismissed. Stratus's public statement that evening confirmed the chaos. Technical disruptions within our compliance verification infrastructure have led to a temporary service pause. Investors weren't fooled. Stock value fell 7 points in 2 days. Major clients paused contracts. Stratus's brand, once synonymous with reliability, now whispered scandal. Through it all, Renee moved like clockwork. Every email she sent was precise, unemotional, impossible to refute. By Friday morning, Meredith Cole, the board chair, called directly. "We need to resolve this quickly, Ms. Brooks," she said, her voice steady but worn. "Our systems can't operate without Sentinel, and your claim appears valid. What would it take to reinstate access?" I gave the terms clearly. A 12-year non-exclusive license, $14 million per year, quarterly payments, acknowledgement of authorship, and indemnification against future interference. She didn't argue. She just asked for 24 hours to present it to the board. I agreed. By that evening, Daniel was out. Resigned for personal reasons, the press release said. In reality, he'd been ejected, his name scrubbed from internal directories like a virus. The irony wasn't lost on me. the man who'd mocked my precision undone by it. When the board reconvened Saturday morning, they voted unanimously to accept my offer. I signed the licensing contract on Monday, 3 signatures that transformed humiliation into leverage. The moment my pen left the page, Sentinel's systems came back online. Portals reopened, reports recalibrated, clients exhaled, order restored by the person they'd tried to silence. I didn't celebrate, didn't gloat. I just felt balance click into place. That night, I stood on my apartment balcony watching the skyline flicker back to normal. Somewhere across the city, Daniel was packing up his desk. I imagined the silence he'd hear as the doors closed behind him. The same silence that once greeted me, except mine had been freedom, and his was finality. The first transfer hit my account before sunrise, a quiet wire of $3.5 million labeled Sentinel Licensing Payment, Q1. I watched the number appear on my screen, then closed the laptop. It wasn't the money that mattered. It was what it confirmed, that the system built to defend truth had become untouchable. Stratus had rebranded the disaster as a strategic compliance alliance, a phrase that looked good on investor slides but fooled no one. The industry understood what had really happened. The firm that fired its architect now rented her architecture. A week later, I signed Aurora Compliance's first lease, a top-floor corner suite overlooking downtown, with natural light instead of fluorescent glare. I furnished it slowly, deliberately. A long table for collaboration, whiteboards for design notes, and one framed artifact, the original Sentinel code header with my signature and timestamp intact. By the time the first quarterly meeting arrived, Aurora had a small but formidable crew: a data integrity analyst, a compliance lawyer, 2 engineers, and a soft-spoken HR lead who believed transparency was a management style. We didn't chase clients. They came to us. Companies burned by their own shortcuts wanted the credibility that Aurora's system gave them. Sentinel X, our next iteration, audited itself in real time, learning patterns of human evasion. It wasn't built to punish. It was built to prove. Every successful rollout felt less like revenge and more like rebalancing something the industry had tilted for too long. I saw my old world in glimpses: conference mentions, articles about the Brooks Clause, panels on ethical automation. Stratus remained a steady client, paying quarterly without incident, its executives polite and cautious. And Daniel Rhodes? He'd resurfaced briefly as a consultant, then disappeared again after another internal investigation elsewhere. It didn't make me proud or vindictive, just confirmed what I'd always known. Systems built on deception eventually reject their operators. I stopped checking the transfers after the 3rd payment. Aurora didn't need their money anymore. We were solvent, respected, and self-sustaining. One night, as I walked through the quiet office, screens dimming to stand by, I realized what peace actually sounded like. No panic, no proving, no waiting for someone else's permission, just the hum of honest machines doing their work. I smiled at the glow of Sentinel X's dashboard, a living system of truth, and whispered to no one in particular, "This is what integrity sounds like." 2 years later, I walked through Aurora's new offices, sunlight cutting across rows of transparent partitions. The place hummed with quiet focus, the sound of people who trusted their work and each other. We'd grown from 5 to 37 employees, not by chasing expansion, but by protecting purpose. Sentinel X had evolved beyond audit automation. It had become a living record of truth for dozens of corporations, trying to rebuild their integrity after scandals of their own. That morning, my assistant told me Stratus's new CEO had requested a meeting. I hesitated before agreeing. When Meredith Cole arrived, she was calm, professional, not the boardroom politician I remembered. She came alone. No entourage, no script. "I'm not here to reopen the past," she said. "I'm here to ask if we can shape the future differently." Her words landed softer than I expected. She explained how Stratus had spent the last year rebuilding from the inside out: transparent governance, accountable culture, ethics training for leadership. She wanted Aurora to partner in creating an intercompany compliance exchange where audits would be shared and standardized across multiple firms. No secrecy, no manipulation, no shortcuts. For a moment, I saw something familiar in her expression. The same exhaustion I'd once felt when integrity cost more than comfort. I didn't answer right away. I asked for time to review the proposal with my team. When she left, I stood at the window watching her car disappear into the flow of the city. It struck me how small revenge feels compared to progress. What I'd built wasn't a monument to humiliation. It was a blueprint for prevention. That evening, as the office lights dimmed, I opened Sentinel-X's main console and added a new footer line in its source code. Integrity isn't negotiable. It's design. I hit save and watched the text disappear into the framework, immortalized in silence. Not vengeance, not victory, just continuity. A reminder that even when systems fail, truth waits patiently for its proof. When Daniel humiliated me in that meeting, I felt powerless. But power doesn't vanish. It hides in preparation. The system I'd built, Sentinel, wasn't just a program. It was a reflection of how I worked: patient, precise, accountable. Every line of code, every time-stamped report, every clause I'd insisted on signing became my safety net long before I knew I'd need it. When Stratus collapsed under its own shortcuts, I didn't have to fight. The truth fought for me. That's what no one tells you about quiet people in loud workplaces. We aren't passive. We're collecting evidence. Arrogance burns fast, but documentation endures. In an environment that rewards performance over principle, patience can feel like weakness. It isn't. It's strategy. I learned that the people who move slow enough to see the cracks are the ones who can rebuild when the structure fails. I didn't set out to win. I just refused to forget. And that became my hidden strength. Daniel lost more than his job. He lost credibility, the currency that doesn't regenerate once trust is gone. I gained something quieter, but deeper: peace. Knowing I didn't need revenge, only record-keeping. In the end, Sentinel didn't destroy Stratus. It simply revealed who was telling the truth. How to get started today. Keep receipts, document every project detail, approval, and change, even small ones. Slow down when pressured to just sign. Read the fine print. Power often hides in overlooked clauses. Build systems that protect integrity. Automate verification wherever possible. Remember, quiet. Consistency is not weakness, it's armor. Your career's stability isn't built on loud wins. It's built on invisible preparation. Have you ever seen documentation save someone's career? Tell me in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Someone you know needs this story today.